My cases came about, as you said, through family
Go
court.
closer to the microphone.
My cases came about, as you said, in family court. And originally I was just fairly displeased with the attorney that I had. And so I wanted to give it a go on my own. We had differences of opinion as to what the right strategy was to achieve what we wanted. And that was, and also financial at the time, and still paying attorney's fees can be very expensive.
And what were you trying to accomplish?
I was trying to gain more access to my son, and also hopefully attempting to just stop continuous litigation that was going on in my case.
And how do you prepare yourself for this?
Well, I had an attorney. My first stop was down at the MCLE Center near Suffolk University in Boston.
So that
they
was
have
actually
the
the Massachusetts
library.
Continuing Legal Education Institute. So you actually went to where lawyers are trained and used their library.
Correct, and for whatever you happen to be involved in, they have kind of the quick, not the quick fix, but the short story version of what's going on in that type of case. And so the first book I bought was just what's I think the Family Law Source book. It was one book, a few hundred pages. I didn't have to do anything but scan a few of the sections that were specifically applicable to me.
And you're also pretty internet literate, aren't you?
Yeah. So later on, I learned how to look for cases online, but I didn't find that until later. Maybe about 2 years ago, but I started being pro se probably 4 years ago.
What would you say the best sites you used on the internet were?
There's two that are excellent. The first one for constitutional law, U.S. Supreme Court law, and cases from the First Circuit Court of Appeals in Massachusetts as part of the First Circuit Court of Appeals is FindLaw. So it's www.findlaw.com. That's excellent. I don't see anybody needing too much more than that on constitutional law. I think it's better than the constitutional law books I've seen because it's point and click. So instead of flipping back the indices in the back of the book and flipping back, I think a lot of people now are familiar with the idea that point and click is sometimes a lot easier to use than a book. In Massachusetts, there's a very good site devoted to specifically what's going on just in Massachusetts, and that's Mass Law, so www.masslaw.com. That's actually a site that's created by the Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly. That's the newspaper that lawyers get in Massachusetts. And that site contains summaries, more like a reporting point of view of some big cases, as well as easy access to the actual opinions of the two appellate courts in Massachusetts, the SJC, Supreme Judicial Court, that's the highest court in Massachusetts, and the Appeals Court, which is a step below the SJC.
Thank you, and we'll get back to you in a few minutes. Joanne, I wanted to ask you, what were your circumstances that got you to go into court without a lawyer, and how did you find it? How did you prepare for it?
Actually, I was trying to work it out with my daughter. I was going for grandparent visitation.
Close to the microphones.
First, I went for custody. I was so worried about my granddaughter. It's a very long story. But I tried to work it out counseling because I knew once you get into court, things can get very messy and expensive. But my daughter was not open to that, so I called a few lawyers and asked how much it would cost, and $100 to $200 an hour. And I just really didn't have the money, so I started going to the libraries, and Hull, Hingham, Cohasset. They're very helpful there. I'm computer illiterate, even though I have a computer sitting in my front room. I learned a lot about the laws and how to go about going into court. The people were somewhat helpful. When I first went in 3 years ago, I think it was February 2000, I got a little bit of help, but on the walls it said we're not supposed to give legal advice, so they just help you a little bit. So when the ball started rolling and I started getting involved with the court, I gave up for a year. It was, I wanted to try and work it out again with my daughter. That didn't work, and I still didn't see my granddaughter. She was being put into shelters with, my daughter was going from shelter to shelter, day shelters, night shelters, because she didn't want to be with me. She lied about me being abusive and on and on. And so I've been in and out of court for 2 years. And at one point, I was totally prepared to go before a judge. And there was 3 other women. This was in Plymouth, Brockton probate. There was 3 other women there going for child support, and they had everything ready. They had their paperwork already. And I noticed that everybody in the court cleared out except for us. And the clerk said to the judge in the back room, they're all pro se. It's kind of like they're part of the wall. So I wrote in to the Chief Justice in Boston, that's the head of all the probate and family courts. So they now make it accessible for people that are pro se. You can go into any courthouse now, and they have tables set up, little leaflets before going into court, looking for legal assistance, and they're much more helpful now.
And you were one of those people who pushed them
Yes,
to do something.
they're helpful. They, even Supreme Court, they help you too. I mean, they'll actually come
You
over.
went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Tell us
Supreme
about
Court.
that.
Oh,
What was that like?
it was like going to the Wizard of Oz. Totally removed up on the 6th floor or 13th floor. First the appeals, or maybe the appeals was on top, and then the Supreme was underneath. It totally removed from the everyday life. I just found it very disillusioning.
Well, what did you do to prepare for it?
I researched a lot. I went to all these libraries, Hull, Hingham, Cohasset, and the women there were very helpful. And I was told you should go to Brockton. They have a very good legal library, and Plymouth, they have a very good.
In the courthouse in Brockton, they do, yes.
Yes, but I couldn't get around. I have a lot of children, and I work, and I just thought, well, all law books are the same. I'm going to go to the Cohasset Library or Hingham, and I found it very helpful. But I wouldn't suggest jumping into court. If you can work it out outside of court.
Negotiate.
Yes.
That's a whole other TV show, how to negotiate.
Yes. And I'm still, I've gone up to Supreme Court, and I've reached a dead end.
How many justices did you go in front of?
Maybe 5 or 6, all different ones.
Did you see a group of them all together, or just one at a time?
Now, are you talking one court or?
The Supreme Judicial
Oh,
Court.
no, Supreme Court, I didn't get in front of a judge. I had to make up a whole booklet, and I had to have 10 of them made up with my case all prepared correctly. I don't know the name, there's so many legal terms, but because I was pro se, I requested a non-conforming application in both places, appeals and
Did they allow you to do that?
They allowed it, but then when I presented my case, I did the best I could. I don't think that they liked me trying to be a lawyer, because I presented a lot of laws that were broken in my case, and my whole family's been devastated by them not upholding the law.
And what was the main issue you were trying to get across?
My granddaughter's safety and happiness.
To this day, you don't know where she is, do you?
No, and my other daughter also did the same thing. They both live places I don't have any addresses, and I don't get to see my grandchildren. I have a clean record. I'm a mandated reporter for elder abuse. I've been criminal checked. I'm always doing things to help people, but when I went into court, they gave me a criminal record. And they can do whatever they want, more or less.
Yes, they can. James,
I think they can.
the longtime battler in the courts, domestic relations, civil rights cases, been on the show before. Can you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to become a pro se litigant, how you prepared for it, and what you would tell people?
Well, it's all very well and good to say that anybody who has a problem with the law should hire an attorney. In principle, I agree with that wholeheartedly. However, it comes down to a question of finances. Most of us live from paycheck to paycheck under the best of circumstances, and then in domestic relations matters, we're hauled into court frequently for unjust reasons, and then the court will find various ways to order us to pay out certain monies, be it in child support or such matters as that, and or we have to pay to keep the wife in the house that we bought for them, and we're expected to go find another apartment, and on top of all of that, we're expected to find and pay for our own attorneys. Well, a lot of us just don't have the money to do it, so we're forced to go pro se as a matter of necessity. How much, I don't know how much more I can say about that.
Well, in your situation, you took a pretty scholarly approach when it came. You actually sued a judge, or tried to sue a judge.
Oh, yes, twice.
First on your own, and then with me. And it was. Well, tell us how you prepared for it on your own.
I can't underestimate or understate the amount of work that goes into it. One has to simply take a crash course in the law. I had you in the first instance. You and I have been friends for a long time, and you were kind enough to allow me to visit you on occasion for consultations. In addition, there are materials that are available to help the pro se litigant get a crash overview in how the law works, and amongst other ones, there's your own very book, How to Win a Lawsuit Without Hiring an Attorney, which I have a copy of, and I have studied this as well as other matters and have made good use of it.
And you ultimately had a victory in federal court without a lawyer. That was fairly publicized.
I'm told by the publisher of Massachusetts News that I established legal history in Massachusetts in that the field of law that I was litigating, I had gotten further in this field than anybody ever had in Massachusetts with or without an attorney. This was a false arrest case based on a theory of impermissible third-party contact. With a restraining order, one is not merely enjoined against direct contact. One cannot tell a third person to go tell the person with the order anything is accused of violating that part of the act. It was a false accusation, and even if it were true, it's something that on its face is difficult to demonstrate. I litigated the matter itself, first of all, in district court, and won a dismissal on my motion. And after I won a dismissal on motion to dismiss the accusation itself, then I filed suit against the officer who had written the original complaint in the first place. And in court, anytime there's a civil lawsuit, it's a matter of routine that the attorney for the defendant will, at some point, relatively briefly into the proceedings, will file a motion for summary judgment. And that happened in my case, and I had to respond to that motion by filing my memorandum of law in opposition of his motion. And I prevailed on the merits. Judge Harrington did not dismiss the case, and the case was bound for trial, and eventually I wound up settling with the city of Lawrence, the police officer's employer, for $5,000.
And the question is it worth it to spend a couple of nights in jail for $5,000?
Well, it isn't just a couple of nights in jail. I mean, you have to add to that the time and expense of going back and forth to court, and the gas and the miles, and all of the